The floor is yours, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Moses Kajwang, my distinguished Senate brother. Honorable members of various parliaments, starting with our own National Assembly and Senate, and all other parliaments that have been acknowledged in introduction by the Honorable Kajwang. Allow me to welcome you to the House of Parliament, to the Republic of Kenya, for this very important climate change summit, the first in Africa, to convene in Africa to talk about Africa for the Africans. As students of history, you know, in 1896, a group of Europeans congregated in Berlin, Germany, and called themselves the Berlin Conference, sometimes called the Congo Conference. These Europeans decided to share Africa. They called it the scramble for and partition of Africa. They shared Africa into many, many, many small countries and ended up giving the Congo as a gift, a personal possession of the King of Belgium. And there started the destruction of our continent. They embarked on violently uprooting communities in Africa, violently drawing boundaries, cutting off communities from one country to another. I saw my Ugandan friends here from where I come from. I'm a frontier citizen, and the majority of my relatives are in Uganda. Then they built railways running from inland to the coast everywhere. There's no railway in Africa that was built running from one landlocked country to another. It was all from inland to the coast, inland to the coast. They embarked on looting our wealth. The entire Western world was built on African sweat, on African wealth, starting with slave trade, slavery, colonialism, imperialism, and currently unequal terms of trade, where we give them our raw materials and take back finished products at sometimes 10, 20 times their original cost. I'm giving you this background to understand why Africa is where we are. We pollute least, we suffer most. And those who pollute sometimes have treated Africa with extreme dishonor. Those of you who are in Paris, and I was, after the Paris summit and the Paris agreement, the greatest polluter on earth, America, their president called the Paris Agreement a mischievous fraud. If you remember, President Trump, who embarked on reversing literally everything that Obama had done, called the Paris Agreement a mischievous fraud and threw it through the window. So as African legislators, representatives of the people of this great continent, even as we congregate to talk, sometimes you find when you withdraw to think deeper that we are alone and on our own. We get tokens not commensurate with what has been taken from us, not commensurate with what we deserve, not commensurate with equity, not commensurate with human dignity. So as you sit here as representatives of the people of this continent, having sat yesterday listening to our presidents from across the continent, speaking candidly, emotionally, and openly about our plight as Africa, I want to encourage us that we strive to move ourselves from a continent of despair to a continent of hope. Because the future is with us. The future is right here in Africa. There are three lungs of the world in terms of climate: the Congo, the Amazon, and the Borneo in Indonesia. But the Congo is the biggest, the richest ecosystem, and if we protect it, its catalytic effect on many other parts of Africa will be felt. Africa is a continent that has been for many years been an object of pity by those who put us where we are, and an object of hopelessness. But nobody will spring us from that despair and hopelessness except ourselves. You are told yesterday that all the commitments from the developed world about adaptation funds, mitigation funds, and all these climate change issues have never been met to the full, sometimes not even 50%. So we must be innovative as Africans. We must think differently as Africans. If you go to your villages, there are stories that you'll be told by villagers who have never gone to anybody's school, but when you listen to them, the conclusion is there is climate change. You'll be told there used to be a big river here, and all you see is a dry gully. You'll be told there was a forest over there, and when you look there, there's no forest.
Honorables and esteemed guests, my name is Nakia Dramani Sound. I'm 11.
We can listen to him.
Maybe it can come later.
Honorables and esteemed
Please,
guests,
Secretariat,
my
let
name
it come
is
later.
Nakia Dramani Sound.
Yeah, let it come later. Sorry, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Thank you. So you'll be told there was a forest there, and when you look, you see no forest. You'll be told we used to do things this way. For those of you who have lived as long as I have, in the 90s, in the 80s, in this country, in the western part of Kenya, for those of you who come from the west, because our ecosystems are a bit different, by the last week of February, you planted your maize whether there was rain or not, because you knew by the first week of March there is rain. And the rains will find your seeds in the soil, they'll germinate, they'll grow, you'll harvest. Today, the rains don't arrive sometimes up to end of March, sometimes into April, sometimes not at all. Like we just went through the cycle of our worst droughts in 40 years as a country. And these changes, we are told, sometimes are because of human activities. We have also been told by those who believe differently that it's because it's the wrath of God and many other things. But we know the altruism is that the climate has changed and changed for the worse. And the genesis of this is human activities. We live as if there's no tomorrow. We pollute with total abundance. If you drive on the streets of Nairobi sometimes, as you drive, you see objects just flying out of people's cars. Packets of biscuits, paper bags of junk food, they just eat and throw them. And in the process, we are destroying our continent. But you are all, as legislators, you hold the purse of your countries. The power of the purse lies in Parliament. Whatever it is that we want to do, you must stamp on the appropriations of our resources. So I want to encourage you as parliamentarians to ensure that in your respective jurisdictions, you are appropriating enough resources for adaptation and mitigation programs on climate change. And it's been shown in parts of our country here, where rivers had run dry, you plant appropriate trees, within 2-3 years you have permanent streams running. So it can be done. Let's have our priorities right. Yesterday you heard our president telling the congregation that we have had to distort our budget because the number of children we must feed in school has grown from 1.5 million to 4 million. When you divert that money, something else suffers. You were told yesterday in the summit there by none other than Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the UN, that the world is so inequitable that we have multilateral financial institutions running the world, lording over the world, with colonial archaic structures, where, as our president said, an African country borrowing from the World Bank, IMF, or all those institutions, you pay 10, 20 times higher than a poor European country. We want equity. And we want those who put Africa where we are to pay for it. Because human history must respect reparations for wrongdoing. Those who stole our gold, those who stole our timber, those who stole our everything must be brought to the table to talk about reparations. Because we are not suffering because of our wrongdoing. We are suffering because we are collateral damage to misconduct of others. And that is what, as legislators, you must not shy away from talking. Fidel Castro once told the Americans, we have your debts, yes, we owe you money, but we can't pay, won't pay, until there is justice, fairness, and equity. We probably will not be that extreme, because we are governed by international instruments of borrowing and lending and all this. Then you have the Paris Club that will call you to humiliate you and call you are a failing state. Then you have all manner of descriptions, highly indebted poor countries, emerging countries. Today you are emerging, tomorrow you are highly indebted and poor. You know, they sit in Washington and decide what tag to put on you as an African country. And the tag they put on you determines whether you access credit or not. So Africans must come together. Africans must speak one language, one voice to protect our continent from the ravages of climate change, but above all, from those who cause this climate change from other places that you suffer most. We had a sad story in this country, honorable members, in the last drought and food shortage, of a woman in Mombasa who had absolutely no food. And her children were there staring at her as a mother. And the children must eat something. So she put a pan on fire, put water, and put stones and started boiling those stones with the hope that these children will sit hoping that the mother is cooking something for them to eat until they get tired and sleep for her to wake up the next day. That is our mother Africa. And I want to assure you, members of parliament, there are no angels out there that are coming to solve the problems of Africa. It is ourselves. And we must learn from each other. Kenya has passed a very progressive climate change bill that has been ascended to. The President of the European Union made reference to it yesterday. I want to encourage those of you, honorable members from other jurisdictions, we'll give you free copies to go with and see whether there are any things you can pick from there as a good precedent. If you improve on it, we'll also borrow back from you to improve ours even better, so that Africa can be in charge of its destiny. We used to be an agenda on tables of discussion. Eventually we crept to the tables of discussion. Now we are setting the agenda on the tables of discussion. And we must never look back. So, Senator Kajwang, as you discuss to come up with a parliamentary declaration from Nairobi, I want to encourage us that as members of parliament you hold very unique positions in our countries. Forget about our petty party differences. At the end of the day, when there's a flood hitting Malawi, it doesn't hit the opposition, it doesn't hit the government, it hits the people of Malawi. At the end of the day, when there is a ravaging drought, it hits all of us. On matters of climate change, I want to urge us to be fiercely and viciously patriotic to our countries, to our mother continent, so that if Kenya can help Somalia, we will. If Uganda can help Kenya, it should. If Malawi can help Zimbabwe, let it be, so that we be each brother's keeper. I want to finish by assuring you once more that Africa is not poor. Africa is a very rich continent with very poor people. If we take charge of our continent, our resources, statistics will show you that Africa has a share of only 5 to 6% of international trade. But the commodities for trade are from where? From Africa. Africa, like you are told, pollutes least, we suffer the most. The ball is in our court as legislators. Let's rise to the occasion. Let's join our heads of state and work together for our continent. For our friends from Europe, these are the hard facts that are available in history. They're not mine. Let's work together and alter the wrongs of history. You know, for Kenya and Tanzania, you know, when they were doing that madness in Berlin in 1918, Mount Kilimanjaro used to be in Kenya. Until Queen Victoria gave it to Prince Ferdinand as a birthday gift. See how they have played with our resources? But in Africa, we agreed our boundaries at independence are our boundaries. We shall never raise those issues. But they're part of our history. God bless you, honorable members. Discuss our continent, and let's build our continent, because nobody else will build it except ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If there was need for a standing ovation, this was it. The Right Honorable Speaker, thank you so much for setting the tone. And the Speaker has made it clear that we are not here to sugarcoat or to pussyfoot. We are here to be bold and even revolutionary. Because if we fail to, then this climate crisis will be noisy and messy. And there'll be casualties. I think that brings us now to a good stage to allow members of parliament to have a conversation. At this point in time...
Chair, you can allow me to retreat to my chamber and do some work?
Mr. Speaker, we'll allow you, but we will call you later on when the Honorable Charity Chepkwony Kathambi will be reading the resolutions.
Yes.
And I know we are discussed, and thank you for accepting.
And I'm hosting you for lunch, all of you, at the Parliamentary cafeteria.
As well as a cocktail for those with the appetite, later after the meeting. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At this point, if the video from our youth ambassador from CVF is ready, we could take it at this point so that we can listen to Ms. Nakayet Dramani Sam. Secretariat, please assure me that it's coming up, otherwise we proceed to the next agenda. It's coming up? Okay, just we can be patient for a second.